Why are the Irish media so reticent to report on gender issues? Not my question, but one that was asked this week by Hugh Linehan in the Irish Times of all places. In the piece, Linehan talks about a blog post published by Irish psychotherapist and occasional Gript contributor Stella O'Malley, who recounts her own experience with the Irish media. O'Malley, a founder of the gender-critical organisation GenSpect, talks about the trend of cancel culture. She talks about how she had slowly, in her own words, been cancelled by the Irish media when she started raising concerns about how young children and teenagers with gender dysphoria were being treated in Ireland and in the UK. O'Malley recalls how she first started raising concerns about medical transition and children back in 2017, saying she never expected it would change her life. She says she wrote about the issue out of a sense of professional duty, having also experienced what's now called gender dysphoria herself as a child. It's the role of the psychotherapist to advocate for vulnerable populations, and I sought to highlight the risks attached to the medicalisation of gender non-conforming kids, she writes. O'Malley says that although the Irish media were clearly nervous about her, between 2018 and 2022, they still published several of her articles on trans issues, yet over time she sensed a growing unease. The Irish media were becoming more anxious, they didn't understand the trans issue and they didn't want to, O'Malley says, stating, Irish journalists let the story pass them by, not because it wasn't important, but because it made them nervous. What's rarely acknowledged is that journalists around the world have avoided this topic out of fear of losing popularity, credibility or status. She writes, in Ireland, cancel culture doesn't burn you at the stake. It quietly leaves you out in the cold. My own cancellation didn't explode, it seeped in. The regime media stepped away, all the while insisting there was no problem per se. They just didn't happen to have the time or space to cover the Maya Four-Starter case or the closure of GIDS at the Tavistock or the cast review or the fact that GenSpect has over 360 detransitioners on our books, each with a harrowing story of medical malpractice. Linehan, as duty editor at the Irish Times, actually gives weight to these claims. He essentially admits that O'Malley is right. She probably was quietly cancelled, and almost certainly because Irish journalists did not want to step on the third rail because of the high cost of doing so. What seems harder to deny, he writes, is that in her case and others, views that challenge the prevailing orthodoxy on gender identity are seen as beyond the pale. Why the reticence, he asks. There is a commonly heard view that to even enter the debate is to engage in a toxic discourse imported from Britain and the US, best avoided in a mature, progressive society. But this is an odd position, especially in a media culture that otherwise shows little hesitation in following every twist and turn of UK and US affairs, from the post-Brexit travails of the Conservative Party to the power struggles within the Trump White House, he writes. The truth may be simpler and more uncomfortable. Irish journalism, like Irish society, is small. The circles are tight. The cost of stepping on the wrong third rail socially, professionally, reputationally is high. Better perhaps to look away, Linehan writes. While there isn't much in the way of an explanation for the problem, the piece does acknowledge that this situation exists, which is really important going forward when we look at the Irish media's coverage of these issues, because as we know, they are not going away. Linehan is right when he says, we need journalists who will discuss these issues honestly.